We're learning the second Sikha on Parshas Vayakhel in Chelek Chavov on page 262. The shir today is being learned Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. Auf dem Pasuk, wo es steht, der Zivui Hashem, was Moshe hat übergegeben zu Yidden, in the Pasuk in this week's Parsha, where it says about the command of Hashem that Moshe Rabbeinu related to Yidden regarding building the Mishkan, which it speaks about in this week's Parsha at length with many details. So the Pasuk says, K'chu me'itchem truma l'Hashem, take from amongst you a truma, a donation for Hashem. Kol nediv liba yiviyeha is trumas Hashem. Every person with a generous heart should bring his truma, his donation to Hashem. Fragim mefarshem, so the commentaries ask on this Pasuk, as l'chayre is da astire in Pasuk mereisha l'seife. It seems to be a Pasuk where there's a contradiction from the beginning to the end of the Pasuk. From tchilas haloshen k'chu me'itcham truma l'Hashem, from the expression of the Pasuk in the beginning where it says take a truma for Hashem, is mashma as the truma zolmen by zay nemen. It seems that it's saying that the truma should be taken from them. V'hainu afilu bal karchach. That means even against their will. On von loshen kol nediv liba yiviyeha, but then when it says one with a generous heart will donate, is mashma as yed yidzol as brengen me'atzmai b'nedivas libay. It's not an obligation, it's not by force, but whoever brings is bringing with his own generosity to donate. On Mizmavayev, and the explanation that's given to understand this pasuk is, as the pasuk redt wegen zwei sugen isina. The pasuk is speaking about two categories of giving. The first part of the pasuk where it says k'chu, to take a donation. Wegen der Trume from Vayakhel. Here it's speaking about the Trume where every Yid gave a half a shekel. This was an obligation for every Yid. And it was demanded that everyone must give this amount of a half a shekel. On the but then the second part of the pasuk where it says kol nediv liba yiviyeha, that every person with his generosity will donate. Oret wegen der Trume was jeder bringt benidvas libay. It's speaking about the donations of all kinds of materials and gold and silver that everyone brought with the generosity of his heart. Not waiting until it's going to be demanded and taken from him, this donation. So it's two different trumas for the Mishkan. However, the question here is, der Pasuk die dann redt sich schon wegen dem Zivui Hashem, wie Moshe hat ihn übergegeben zu Yidden. Parshas Vayakhel, it speaks about the way Moshe Rabbeinu is relating Hashem's command about building the Mishkan to Yidden. So now the question is, wie kommt es? Why is it as earlier, in Im Zivui Hashem Atzmai, where the Torah records the actual command of Hashem himself, was the Rabbi hat angesagt to Moshe, the way Hashem says the command to Moshe, and that is Betchilas Parshas Truma. In the beginning of Parshas Truma, there steht bloß, Daber al bnei Yisrael v'yikchu li truma meiz kol ish asher yidvenu liboy. The pasuk says once in the beginning, take this truma from Yidden, and then again it says tikchu es trumasi, and then again it says v'zayis truma asher tikchu mi'itam. So it always mentions the term of to take, meaning taking even without their will, without their generosity, to donate. Und so wird dort nicht der Mond, der Inyan von kol nediv liboy yiviyeha. The expression that it says here, that one will come and donate on his own, is not mentioned there. Why is this? On Afalpi, as in the psukim von dem Zivui dorten, seinen Gimel Trumas Amurais. The fact that the Torah repeats the expression of Truma 3 times, as Rashi says, the reason is because it's including all 3 categories of Truma, 3 different categories of donations. Nicht nur die zwei Trumas welche bam b'choiva. Not only 2 categories of Truma that was an obligation, which is the Trumas Bekel Agolgeiles, Shanas Mem Ha'adonim. They gave a half a shekel each, and that's what they made the sockets, the Adonim, that are under the Kroshim of the Mishkan. Und Trumas Mizbeach Bekel Agolgeiles Lekupais Litnis Mem Karbonis Tzibur. And then also the Machzas HaShekel that they gave, that was placed in boxes in the funds to buy the Karbonis. Not Oich Trumas HaMishkan, which is Nidvas Kol Echad Ve'echad. The third truma, which is the donation that everybody gave according to his amount, is also mentioned there. for the Tzarchei HaMishkan, for all different parts of the Mishkan. Von deswegen, but nevertheless, is by der Trumme in Pasuk nicht mefurish, as jeder eine soll das bringen mit was Libai wie in Pasuk da. It doesn't mention at all in the Pasuk that this third Trumme, everybody gives with the generosity of his own heart, as it mentions it here in our parsha. Nor da steht beloshen me'es kol ish asher yidvenu libai tikchu es trumasi. You take it. Man soll es nehmen. So what's the reason for this? Why is this concept of Nediv Liboy not mentioned in Parshas Truma? Seemingly, we can say the answer is as follows. As das ist Toli in noch zwischen die Psukim bereish Parshas Truma beim Tzivui Hashem leMoshe und die Psukim shebe Parshas Seinu mit Tzivui Moshe lebnei Yisrael. This difference is connected to another point where we see in the language of the Pasuk that there's a difference between what it says in the beginning of Parshas Truma and in this week's Parsha. Bereish Parshas Truma steht, in the beginning of Parshas Truma it says, as the Rebbe hat angesagt, daber el bnei Yisrael. The Rebbe says, speak to the Yidden. So it mentions, it refers to Yidden as bnei Yisrael. But Parshas Seinu aber steht, Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas bnei Yisrael. Here it says that Moshe Rabbeinu gathers, and it defines Yidden the drop differently. Kol adas bnei Yisrael, the entire congregation of Yidden. Was die Hakole und der Dibor al kol adas bnei Yisrael is given. Now when it says here, this expression of kol adas bnei Yisrael, what is this referring to? Is given nit nur zu ibegeben die Azharas Shabbos. It's not only for what it says in the beginning of the parsha, where it speaks about the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos, even while you have to build a Mishkan. Und Leimar, as Malachas HaMishkan is nit doiche Shabbos, and it's being said here to warn Yidden and explain them that the building of the Mishkan does not push off Shabbos. Nor euch bechdei zu ibegeben wegen Malachas HaMishkan. Moshe Rabbeinu gathers kol adas b'nei Yisrael to speak to them about the work of building the Mishkan. When we says mefurish in Pasuk, nit blois betchilas haParsha, as it's clear in the Pasuk, it says not only in the beginning of the Parsha, nor euch bazunder beim Omzag of Malachas HaMishkan, but then again and separately, when it comes to the work of the Mishkan, vayeme Moshe el kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speaking to the entire congregation of Yidden. So what's the difference between these two expressions? B'nei Yisrael or kol adas b'nei Yisrael? The difference between these two expressions we can say is as follows. In dem Lashon daber al b'nei Yisrael und nit al derech wie euch bereish Parshas Kedushin, wo the Tzivui Hashem is given, daber al kol adas b'nei Yisrael. So when it says only b'nei Yisrael, when Moshe Rabbeinu, he hears that Hashem is commanding just Moshe Rabbeinu, and it doesn't say like it says in the beginning of Parshas Kedushin, where there also Hashem speaks and it says El Kol Adas B'nei Yisrael, is nit mudgish as a tzivui l'chol b'nei Yisrael. It doesn't highlight, it's not making the point that it's to all of Yidden. Or bepashtus darf man lernen, so simply what it means is, as das is given, der tzivui as die Gizbarim sollen nehmen die alle drei Trumas meis b'nei Yisrael. Reason it only says that this is the command of Hashem to Bnei Yisrael is because it doesn't actually include, it's not a mitzvah referring to all Yidden, but it's the mitzvah to the Gizbarim, to the caretakers, the one in charge, that had to go and then demand from Yidden to give their Trumah. Then when Moshe Rabbeinu relates the command, and he says to all Yidden, Al Kol Adas Bnei Yisrael, und reden dich zu alle Yidden. Here Moshe Rabbeinu is not only speaking to the ones in charge, but speaking to all of Yidden, nit nur as man soll auskleiden Gizbarim, auf nehmen die Trumme, not only to choose ones in charge that will demand the Trumme, hat in dem Tzivui ausgestellt, wie sei die offene Trumme darf sein. Here Moshe Rabbeinu describes how the donations should be given, euch, and therefore he includes, ubeikir, and primarily, wie es ist bescheiches zu Yidden, as this relates to all Yidden, and therefore it says here, Kol Nediv Liba Yivyeha Es Trumas Hashem, that everyone with a generous heart will bring his Trumah to Hashem, not waiting until the ones in charge will come and demand and take, but referring to all Yidden that come and donate with their generous heart. That's the explanation, seemingly, for the difference. But this explanation is still not smooth, because this is move on bepashtus, it's self-understood as beim Ibegeben dem Tzivui Hashem al Bnei Yisrael. When Moshe Rabbeinu relates the command of Hashem to Yidden, hat Moshe nicht zugegeben in dem Dibur Hashem etwas, was der Rebbe hat ihm nicht angesagt. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't add anything that Hashem did not tell him clearly. Moshe hat sicher gar nicht gesagt, al das atzmai. Definitely, Moshe Rabbeinu does not say anything just with his own understanding. Is versteht nicht der Pratanal, kol nediv libe yiviyah, betzivi Hashem al Moshe. So therefore the question still remains, if this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is giving over to Yidden, so he must have heard this from Hashem, so why does it not say this in Hashem's command to Moshe? Now, in Afapi, as Megefin bekame Mekaimis, we find this in many places, as Moshe hat angesagt, Yidden kame Pratim, welche die Teire ist nicht mefaret in dem Zivi, was der Eibishter hat angesagt zu Moshe. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu will say things, and there's more details that are not included in the command that Hashem says to Moshe. So this is another case where Moshe Rabbeinu says another detail, and it must have been included in Hashem's command when he speaks to Moshe, but it wasn't mentioned before. Vatam, and the reason is, it's obvious, it's clear that Moshe Rabbeinu will not say anything on his own. It's pashut to move it's self-understood as Kenene from the Ala Pratea Diburim, Bashteim B'tzivi, Moshe B'nei Yisrael. There can't be even one detail that there is in the command, the way Moshe Rabbeinu relates it to Yidden, hat nicht gefällt in dem Eibishten's Ansag zu Moshe. Nothing was missing. It was all there in when Hashem commanded Moshe. Now in the Torah steht nicht alle b'mefurish, euch in dem Tzivi Hashem und Moshe. The Torah does not specify all details twice. It doesn't say everything. All details when it says how Hashem gave over the command to Moshe, and then when Moshe Rabbeinu gives it over to Yidden. And so we find this in more than one place in Torah. So this is just another example for this. And Moshe Rabbeinu must have heard from Hashem this point of Kol Nediv Liba Yiviyah. However, Neisif Lezeh. In addition to the fact that in each place, this we see this, that the Torah is adding a detail in the command of Moshe that's not specified before. There's a reason needed to explain this. Why is the Torah specifying these details specifically when Moshe Rabbeinu gives over the command? Is nidden done in our case here, nid bedaimet to the andere fallen b'chkama mekaimis. It's not the same as the other cases as mentioned in other places. Because even if you are to understand, as das was the Torah, the mont nit bechlal, dem Tzivi Hashem Moshe, the fact that the Torah is not mentioned in the command to Moshe, or the zaktas both in kloli bekitzer. Many times the Torah doesn't even say at all the command of Hashem to Moshe, or it says it in a general sense and concisely. Is das the far of the Torah falosich of the protei hadiburim and the tzivi for Moshe Lebnei Yisrael, because the Torah is relying on the fact that it already will all be elaborated upon in the details where it speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu, relating it to Yidden. Und man wird verstehen, dass das alles ist gewesen mit Dibur Hashem al Moshe. And then it's self-understood that Hashem commanded and said this to Moshe Rabbeinu to give over to the Yidden. That's in all cases where we see that the Torah does not specify that much. In our case, though, it's difficult to accept this. Da is doch der Tzivi Hashem mefurish o mefurit in Teire bepratius o beprati pratius. In our case, when Hashem is giving over the command to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not written just in the general sense, build the Mishkan, without any details. Here it says it with all the details, and every minute detail. Sai klolis malachas ha-Mishkan, the general work of the Mishkan, inside the Tzivi of Trumas HaMishkan, the command about the donating to the Mishkan, and with all the details. But Vayakhel became, but yet for some reason, is da nit mefurish the prat from Kol Nediv Liba Yiviyas Trumas Hashem. The detail of the fact that it's related to every individual Yid, that he should donate with the generosity of his heart, this pasuk, this expression that Moshe Rabbeinu said, which obviously is not his own addition, it's not mentioned before. So in our case, it definitely requires an explanation. If the Torah is going through every detail and it mentions everything before in Parshas Truma, why is this detail not mentioned there? So we can say and explain this as follows. What is the Mishkan all about? It's an atonement for when Yidden sinned with the golden calf. Wie Rashi sagt, dem Tam was es wird angerufen Mishkan Eidos. As Rashi explains why the name of the Mishkan is referred to as the Mishkan, the tabernacle of the testimony. What is this a testimony for? Eidos li Yisrael. It's a testimony for Yidden. Shevittelem HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Maisa Egel. That Hashem overlooked or Hashem forgave on what happened with the Egel. Shaharei Hishra Shchinase B'neiim. Because Hashem dwells with His Shechina again amongst Yidden. That's the whole point of the building of the Mishkan. Was that Indian is like Beide Deis. This idea is true according to both opinions regarding the timing of when the Yidden heard the command of the building of the Mishkan. One opinion, and this is the opinion that Rashi brings, that the entire command, where Hashem commands to Moshe, when it says in Parshas Truma, Vasil Mikdash, this was really all said after the Chet HaEgel on Yom Kippur. And then also, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu gives it over to Yidden later. And also according to the opinion, as the Eibishter hat der Tzivi v'Asil Mikdash gesagt, fahren Chet HaEgel. The command that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu about building the Mishkan, that actually came already before Yidden sinned with the golden calf. Aber die Yidden haben dem Tzivi gehört von Moshe Rabbeinu und gebracht in Nidvus HaMishkan erst nach Yom Kippurim. The command to build the Mishkan was related to Yidden only after the Chet HaEgel, and they donated only afterwards. But either way, the building of the Mishkan was for the sake of an atonement for the Chet HaEgel. Now, wie haben Yidden mit dem Binyan am Mishkan? Areis gebracht sehr charotte gemura auf dem Chet HaEgel. So how did the Yidden, with the building of the Mishkan, express their complete regret for the Chet, for this sin with the golden calf? The mit, was anstatt dem Sof, was sie haben früher gegeben mit Zrizus zu lieben Egel, by the fact that instead of this, that the Yidden went and donated and gave with alacrity all their gold for the Egel, haben sie jetzt gegeben Zov mit Nedivus Levi Seir fahren Binyan Mishkan. Now they gave their gold with a extraordinary generosity for building the Mishkan. Kedei soll sein die Ashras Ashchine bei sei, v'shachanti b'seicham. Heipech von dem Chet HaEgel. In order to bring the Shchine to dwell amongst them, the opposite of what was done with the Chet HaEgel. This was the act of Yidden to bring the kapara in the building of the Mishkan. Wie sie haben Tage bepeil, Areis gewissen die gewaltige Zrizos und Nidvas Alev zu Malachas HaMishkan. And as Yidden actually expressed an unusual alacrity and generosity in building of the Mishkan, wie erzählt in the Psukim, Ubarucha, b'Medrash Razal, as it's explained in the Psukim of this week's Parsha, and even more in the Medrash. Bizas is given, Marbe ma'am lahavim midei aveda l'malacha, as the pasuk says that they brought too much for what was needed for the work. The work and what was available, all the materials was enough and with extra. And to add to this even more, where and how is it expressed? The full internal and genuine regret and remorse of Yidden. Und sie ratzen as der Eibishter soll Scheire sein zwischen sie, beratzen the Belev Shalom, and the expression of their will and desire that Hashem should dwell amongst them, and this should be a full-hearted desire, is das nicht as they feel in the Trume from Beka Lagol. It's not expressed as much in the donation that Yidden are all giving, the half a shekel that they're obligated to give. This is an equal obligation for every Yid. Warum? Even when this mitzvah is fulfilled with alacrity, it does express a desire of the heart. It still does not fully express clearly the true, genuine desire with a full heart. Because it's possible to say that the obligation, the fact that they must bring it, is the reason why they're fulfilling the mitzvah and giving the machzas hashekel. Dafke in the trume was hot mit kinchiv v'shir kotzev. Specifically when it comes to this donation for the Mishkan, that does not have an obligation and it does not have a set amount what you have to give. Now yet the Yid get this mitzad hergish v'nidvas libay. Every Yid is giving with his feeling and with his level of generosity. And then dafke drikt zechayis di charote gemura. This expresses their complete remorse for what they did before with the Zrizus for donating for the Egel. And now a full desire and with their full heart to desire the dwelling of the Shechina amongst them. And this is the time, so this is the reason, was in dem Tzivui Hashem leMoshe, benegei der Trume, when it comes to Hashem's command to Yidden regarding this Trume, steht bloß wegen dem Prat halakiche. So in Parshas Truma, it only speaks about the detail of the Gizbarim, the caretakers, the ones in charge that take the donation. To take. Und nicht wegen Prat, Hanesine, Vahahava, mitzad Yidden, kol nediv liba Vayakhel geimer. And there, the detail about the giving and the bringing, the donating with a generous heart is not mentioned. The reason is that Tzivay Hashem passed be'ikir of dem lekiche was das tundig is bottom. The command of Hashem, the obligation that comes from above, where Hashem is commanding, that's something that is related to the ones that are in charge to come and take. So here the detail of the generosity of the Yidden to give with alacrity is not the focus. In the Avo, however, in our parsha where we're speaking about the Yidden, they are coming and donating, is called in Yonah, was the Yidden given boivin. So the whole point there is to describe how Yidden are giving. And they give in a manner as herzachon, nit that tzivi v'chayva. That's what's being expressed here, is not a fulfilling of an obligation, of a command. Now, blois the hergish and the divas alev, rather their own personal feeling. That this is their feeling that they have for this matter. It's in this that's expressed the kamayim haponim laponim, that just like the water creates a reflection when one's puts his face across the water, and same here, kishem v'nisratza kadosh baruch hu Yisrael b'simcha ubelev shalem. Just like Hashem forgave Yidden with joy and a complete heart of dem chet egel for the aveir of the egel, is euch by Yidden gewend der rotzen b'simcha ubelev shalem to the Meibischen. So too by Yidden they had a desire with a joy, with a complete heart to donate to the Mishkan. So this explains why Dafke in this week's parsha, where the focus is on the act of Yidden and to express their own personal feeling and generosity in giving to the Mishkan, here it says this detail of Kol Nediv Liba Yeviyahu. Now, that Inyan Anal, this point, the Nedivas Alev in Yidden Lemelechas HaMishkan, the Yidden's generosity with their own personal feeling to give for the Mishkan, Nidvis is verbunden mit dem Tzivim L'mayla, not only as just a result of fulfilling an obligation from Hashem, is negeyad nitna to the kapara of chet egel. This is a significant point, not only for the atonement for the chet egel, nor oichu beikeh to the etzem hashras hashchina b'mishkan. It's also relevant for the very dwelling of the shchina, the way that the shchina comes down in the mishkan and b'soich b'nei Yisrael amongst Yidden, because there are two stages to this. It says mavur b'kama mekaymis. It's explained in many places. As Chotsch, the Yidden by Matan Torah haben gesehen in Yonim Nailam Admoid. At the time of Matan Torah, Yidden experienced and saw godliness to a very high degree. As it says, Vayered Hashem alar Sinai, Hashem descends on the mountain, and Atem Re'isim Gaimer, the Pasuk goes on to describe what Yidden saw. Und sie sind azenes alle geworden, bis as Paskazu Amassen. Yidden became elevated to a level where the impurity that was in the world from the time of Chet Tzadas was removed. Von deswegen, but nevertheless, sind die Yidden noch dem durchgefallen bei Chet Egel. Following Matan Torah, not long after, the Yidden stumbled and they did the Aveir of Chet Egel. So the question is, wie is es shaykh? How is it possible that so shortly after Matan Torah, Yidden fell so low? So the explanation is, well, the Gilu of Matan Torah is given mitzad l'mayla. This was all a revelation of Hashem's unlimited power that expresses itself and comes down to the lowest place, including here to the Yidden below. V'hainu, meaning, as their bitter v'aliyah v'sat sich dan aufgetan, whatever level of refinement and elevation Yidden experience and the world experience at the time of Matan Torah, by Yidden, is nit given mitzad zeh alein. It wasn't that the Yidden, their entity, from below, that they themselves were really changed and elevated by this. Nor mitzad l'mayla. It's all just a result of a revelation from above. The Meibishten, from Hashem's perspective, or from Hashem's behalf. And to use the expression the Medrash says about Matan Torah, that from above Hashem descends here below, and that it's the haschala, it's only from Hashem's behalf that He comes down here to this world, but it comes into this world in a place where there is a tremendous level of refinement, but not that the actual entity of the world itself, from its own, is changed and becomes really a vessel for this revelation. That's the Matan Torah. So what this means is, as we bald, das is nicht gewend der Öfte von the Yidden Gufe, since the Yidden did not reach this and did not come to this on their own, with their preparation and their work, therefore it was possible that after Matan Torah, noch the Gilui von Matan Torah, can sein der Afshari is von a Yeride bis zum Chet Egel. The Yidden were able to fall. It was a possibility for them to fall, and to the point that they fell by the Chet Egel. And al derech vidas is benegeya the kedusha from Har Sinai bepashtus. This is similar to what we see regarding the holiness of Har Sinai, the mountain itself. As in the Zeit von Matan Torah, in dem Zman, when Vayera da Vayakhel Har Sinai, at the time of Matan Torah itself, when Hashem descends on the mountain, is in Geshem von Har Sinai. In the physical entity of the mountain itself, nimshach geworden, azar hoiche kedusha, biz as kol negeya b'har moisyumas. A level of kedusha that the pasuk says that if one just touches this mountain, then he has to die. But immediately after Matan Torah, b'msheich hayovel, when you heard the sound of a shofar, the simin of siluk shchina, this was the sign that the shchina is removed, is heima yalu bahar. They can go up, they can ascend onto the mountain. Har Sinai is wieder geworden am Metzias, the menakotze ala kotze, choyel legamri. The entity of the mountain changed from one extreme to the other and became another mundane mountain like any other mountain. Now, the accomplishment of Yidden working from below, that they themselves should now change and come and be elevated, was durch dem, werden sie kelim ru'uyim zu Kabbalas Eira Kedusha bekvies, that Yidden themselves become a vessel to contain and absorb this holiness in a permanent manner. This is when Yidden are giving, not just giving as a result of a command of Hashem, but giving from themselves, with their own personal feeling, with joy and with a complete heart. By donating gold, silver, and copper for the Mishkan, for the sake of building the Mishkan. Not only because of a command, but with the generosity of their own heart. Is the Ashras Hashchina Bazei Gevaren an Inyan Kavua. This is where the dwelling of the Shchina becomes something which is permanent. Das hat euch durchgenommen die Gashmias Hagov Va'ilam, and therefore this also permeated the physical body and the physical world. As the Kedusha is nikva geworden in dem Cheftze, Geshem von Mishkan v'chalakov la'olam va'ad. And this is a Kedusha that becomes affixed and permanent in the physical object of the Mishkan and all of its parts forever. The chalakim of the Mishkan remain holy forever. That's why this idea of Nediva slave is a significant point regarding the extent of the dwelling of the Shechina in the Mishkan. That it dwells in the Mishkan itself, that it becomes completely, fully permeated with the Shechina in a permanent manner. Al pizeh, based on this, kemen euch mas bezayin, noch hashinui zwischen die zwei Parshias. There's another thing that we can see a change between the pasuk in Parshas Truma to this week's parsha that can be explained. The lashon in Parshas Truma, reden dig wegen der Truma was kommt in Dove in Parshas Truma when it speaks about this that they donate, steht me'eis kol ish asher yedvenu li begeimer, that you should take the Truma from every man that will donate with his heart. Was bepashtus, was zieht sich das bloß zu anoshim. Simply, ish means it's referring only to men. Anyone that will have the generosity and will donate, was nediv leiv stam means sai anoshim and sai noshim. Simply, nediv leiv includes both men and women. Aber frat as der Zivi kol nediv liebe geimer is gesagt geworden zu kol adas bnei Yisrael. Especially when it says this expression of kol nediv libe, it follows what the pasuk says before, as pointed out, kol adas bnei Yisrael, the entire congregation. Was Moshe hat makel gewen, when Moshe gathered everyone, was in dem seine nichlal nit nor anoshim nor euch noshim. It includes men and women, wie der Ramban sagt alasar, as the Ramban points out here. Und wie mesuper in hemshach parsha, and as we see clearly, the story in the continuation of the parsha, as in nidvas ha-mishkan haben sich bepoil mishtatev gewen, nit nor anoshim, in the donating to the Mishkan, who are the ones that actually participated, not only the men, nor euch noshim, the women as well, v'yadarabah. Even more, the pasuk says, vayavoyu ho-anoshim al-anoshim, that the men came following the women. Ho-anoshim nitfulu lo-anoshim. The men were secondary to the women. Isn't it move on? So the question here is, was wird nit dem Mond frier in Parshas Truma as euch noshim zene nichlal in der Truma Gimel? Why is it not mentioned before, this detail that women are also included in this mitzvah and they participated in the third Truma where everyone can bring whatever his heart desires to donate to the Mishkan? And that's something that's highlighted specifically here in Parshas Vayakhel. So based on what the Rebbe explained before, the Rebbe explains here what this detail means as well. So the explanation for this is with the following introduction. Es ist Yidua, as Ish wie Isha, man and woman, sind an euch Merames of die zwei Beginnes von Mashpia und Mekabel. What they hint to is the two levels of the Mashpia, the giver and the recipient. Was der Fall während der Eibishter und Yidden, Knesset Yisrael, zugeglichen zu Ish wie Isha, Chosen Vekala. So therefore the Eibishter and Yidden, the relationship between them is compared to an Ish wie Isha or a Chosen and Kala, as it says in the entire Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs that talks about the relationship of Yidden to Hashem like a husband and wife. Das ist euch der Bier, and then this also explains another thing, was Teire Shebiksav wird angerufen, Musar Vicha. Teire Shebiksav, the written Teire, is referred to as the Musar, the teachings of your father. And Teire Shebal Peh, the oral Teire, is Teire Simecha, the Teire of your mother. Why are the two sections of Teire compared to a father and a mother? The chiluk zwischen Teire Shebiksav and Teire Shebal Peh is, the difference between the two is, was Teire Shebiksav is in ganzen gegeben geworden Momaila. Teire Shebiksav is given as is, with every word, no more, no less, completely from above. This is the Gilui from Teire Shemitzad HaMashpia. This is the aspect of Teire which is being revealed from the giver, from Hashem's behalf. The Gilui from Teire Shebal Peh is Durich Yidden. However, when it comes to Teire Shebal Peh, which is also completely given from Hashem, however, the development and the explanation, the revelation of Teire Shebal Peh, that's developed by the learning of Yidden here below. They toil and work and learn in Teire, and therefore they innovate in the Teire. As the Meshach HaDeiris, and therefore throughout generations, wird als mehr und mehr nisgala von Teire Shebal Peh. Constantly additions are being added, and more is revealed, that is, in Teire Shebal Peh. Und der Fahr ist beim Vayakhel Teire Shebal Peh zu Imecha, and therefore we relate this aspect of Teire, the Teire Shebal Peh, to the mother, Isha, the woman. Mekabel, she's a recipient, that's the woman in this position. While the Gilui from Teire Shebal Peh is mitzad Mekabel, Isha, because the revelation of Teire Shebal Peh comes from the Yidden, the Isha, the recipient from Hashem. That's this section of Teire that the Yidden below, with their work, are revealing this aspect of Teire. Davon werden die Inyanen nicht alschol bis zu Ish, the Isha kipshutai. This is also something which is then reflected in the nature of the Ish v'Isha here below in the literal sense. As in Am Yisrael, Gufe haben die Noshim amayli Yisere legabi anoshim in them. Regarding this point, there is an advantage that you see in the women even more than the men. Was bei sie is mehr begilu der Inyan von Aveda mitzad mekabel. By the women, this Aveda, to work from below, to elevate oneself, is more expressed and more revealed by women more than men. Wie mezet b'muchish, as you can clearly see, as Noshim darfen it, haben sehr viel Zirus auf Inyanim von Yiddishkeit wie an Noshim. That women do not have to be encouraged in matters of Yiddishkeit as much as men. Warum bei sie mitzad tivam, because by them, it's natural for them, it's instinctive. Leicht die Emunah b'Hashem. The belief and their simple faith in Hashem is something which is more expressed. Und sie haben Yiras Hashem. And therefore also as a result, they have more of an awe of Hashem's presence. Mehr wie bei Männern. Naturally, and easier even more than the men. Ad kedei kach, as es wirkt auf sehr meise bepeil, to the point that this is something that affects their actual behavior. Und wie wir gefunden es bei der Mitzvah Rishayna, was steht in Teire, and we see this expressed also regarding the very first mitzvah that Teire says, Pru revu, the mitzvah of to be fruitful and multiply, to have children. Because I can say from Pru revu is angesagt geworden nar der Mish. Who's commanded on this mitzvah? Only the man has this mitzvah. Mashenki the Isha is nit mitzvah al periviribya. The woman, the mitzvah is not hers. She does not have this command. And the time of them is, what's the reason why this is only the mitzvah of the man and not the mitzvah of the woman? So the reason is, nit, weil das ist nit kein Chelek von dem Tafka de Isha ali Domis. There's no way to explain this, to say that this is a mitzvah that is not the purpose of the woman's existence here in this world. Al derech, similar to another section of mitzvahs that women are not obligated in. V'Torah hat ihr befreit von mitzvahs aseish as man grome. Those mitzvahs that are tied to a certain time frame, the women are exempt from. Was eine von the biyurim bezeh is, one of the explanations given for this is, as das is the fahr, was is mishubedes labaylo lasses tzrachov, und ihr tafkid is, if zu anfirin b'chol in yonei abayis, because the woman is there to be for the husband and to take care of the home, to be the akeres abayis, and therefore she's freed from any obligation which will tie her down to a specific time. So this is not her tafka, this is not her job in the world. So, but this can't be said though regarding the mitzvah of Piravi Ribya, to have children. Says doch Adarabe v'Adarabe. The opposite is true. Dafke inir is talei as the ish or can oisfin sein tzivui. It's only with a woman that the man can fulfill his mitzvah of having children. Nachmer, furthermore, the ikir inyan oilada verdurch geführt dafke durch der isha. The birth is through the woman. Und sie wird angerufen akeres abayis. She is the anchor and the main one of the home with the children. So why is it that the woman does not have the mitzvah and the mitzvah is only for the man? So the Tamadavar is, so the reason for this is, this point that the main mitzvah is actually fulfilled through the woman, this itself is the reason why she doesn't have to be commanded. By an ish, for the man, it's necessary to command him. On this mitzvah, because if not for the command of the Torah, the Torah cannot rely on the man with his instincts and with his nature that he will definitely fulfill the mitzvah of having children. When it comes to the woman, though she does not need any command for this. She senses instinctively, and it's her nature, it's her character, that's her position in the world to be the mother of the home, and to establish a family and generations of Yidden, and to guarantee the continuation of the Jewish nation. She will do this on her own. She doesn't need a command for this. So the lack of a command is a result of the fact that she has it and she feels it instinctively. And this is expressing the point mentioned that we see clearly by women that they have this instinctive amunah and yiras Hashem to do what Hashem wants, even more expressed than by the men. This is also one of the explanations in them. When it comes before Matan Torah, hat der Rebbe angesagt, Moshe koi soimar leveis Yaakov. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that this is what you should say to Beis Yaakov. So who does Beis Yaakov refer to? Elu anoshim. It refers to what Moshe Rabbeinu should say to the women. Taima lehen beloshen raka. And to them you can speak softly. Nitvi to the anoshim was v'saged levenei Yisrael. There the pasuk uses a different expression of v'saged. You should speak to the men. The term v'saged here means dvarim hakoshin kegidin. You should speak to them strongly and harshly, kegidin, like a bitter herb. So why is it by the women that it's enough to speak softly? While by Nashim is oichan amira b'loshen raka, because with the women, even to just speak softly, maspik, it's sufficient. I've piled them as the greatkeit of Kabbalah Satayre, to prepare them to be ready to receive the Torah. That's the difference between the Ish and the Isha in the relationship between Yidden and Hashem. So now based on this, we come back now to understanding how it is with the donating to the Mishkan. This is the explanation here in what we're talking about. The mile of nidvas anoshim is b'shayches to the truma hagimel. The advantage of the women, even more than the men, is in relation to the third truma. And this is a donation that does not have any set amount, and it's not an obligation. It's a truma that comes totally from the generosity of the person himself. It's in this kind of truma where the women shine more, they're on a higher level even than the men. And therefore, in Parshas Truma, wo der Teichen Ikri von der Truma is, wie das ist Betzivya Kadosh Baruch Hu Kanal. There, it's Hashem's command, giving over the command to Moshe from above, the obligation. Is dort nit hamakin la'adgoshe zu, la'adgoshe as oich noshim zenen bechlal zeh. So there is not the place to highlight this point that the women are extraordinary and they stand out and they're donating. Because here we're speaking about the command from above. In that sense, that's not where the women stand out. Dafke beparshaseinu. When es redt sich wegen die Trumme, wie die Trumme is a reis bepoil mitzad Yidden. Here it speaks about how the donating came about when Yidden are actually doing this. Und zeyer nidivas alev kanal, and their own personal feeling and generosity. The far werd dov mefurish Mudgish dem Yisrael Meile von die Noshim legabi ha'an Noshim. Here, the Torah highlights and explicitly points out the advantage that the women have even more than the men. Und in Meiles HaNoshim hat sich ausgedrückt, the advantage of the women in this was expressed nicht nur benegeya kamus hanadovis, not only regarding the amount of the donations that was given, as mentioned before, nor eichu b'shaychus dem sug hanadovis ve'eichus hanadovis. The category and the quality of their donations was on a higher level. Aleph number 1, die Noshim haben gebracht nicht bloß their teureste Tachshitim. The women donated not only their most expensive jewelry, nor sie haben in die Nidvais HaMishkan reingelegt their chayes and koiches HaNefesh. They also invested in the donating to the Mishkan their entire energy and all of their talents. Biz as v'chol isha, as the pasuk describes, that all the women, chachma slave, that were wise, biyodeha tovu vayaviu matve goyme. With their own hands, they spun the wool or the hairs of the animal, and they brought this to the Mishkan. That they had this unique wisdom in their heart. Tovu esizim. They spun the goats here. They expressed a unique craftsmanship in the way they did this, that they spun this on the body of the goat itself. So they invested their fullest amount with all of their talents. Das heißt, sie haben weggegeben und reingelegt, sie Chachme, v'chushim, v'chishreinis, in Nidvas HaMishkan. They invested and gave their wisdom, their talents, and all their senses in the donating to the Mishkan. Bay is another point. Wie erzählt B'siyam HaParsha, as the Torah relates, in the end of the Parsha, is Neisuf of Nechoshes Atnufa. In addition to the copper, haben die Noshim Menadel given die Marais Hatzayvais Farin Kir V'Kanai. They also brought mirrors that were copper mirrors they donated, that was used to build the kir and the kanai, which was the basin that was used for the washing before you do the Aveda in the Mishkan. Rashi brings that up, as Rashi explains what was unique about this, as the Marais Hatzeves and the Geven, the Marais was the Nishei Yisrael haben genutzt b'Mitzrayim. These were the mirrors that these women used when they were still in Mitzrayim, zu aufstellen zwois Rabbis b'Mitzrayim. And this is how they gave birth to children. And they established the myriads and myriads of the Yidden, the army of the entire Klal Yisrael that came out of Mitzrayim. Und dafke auf der Nedove, and specifically with this donation, hat der Rebbe gesagt, Eilu chaviven alai min hakol. These donations are more beloved than me more than anything else. Weil dafke in them, it's specifically here in this, drikt sich aus die Meile von Nidvas Alev, es kommt in ganzen Mitzad HaMekabel. This donation of theirs fully expressed this advantage of a donation that's coming completely from the feeling of the one that's donating. Mitzad zei eigene gefühl and hechlich, zu aufstellen, tzivus Hashem. It's because of their own feeling that they had for the necessity to have children and to give birth to the army of Hashem that comes out of Mitzrayim. Haben die Noshim sich mishtadle gewen mit der Hilfe von die Marais Hatzeves. The women made an effort with the assistance of these mirrors to attract their husbands to them, to come and have children. Bis sie haben das durchgeführt bepoil. And they actually went and accomplished this and gave birth to the many children and to the many Eden that came out of Mitzrayim. So it's these Marais Hatzeves that expresses this unique quality of the women that are doing this with their own personal feeling and going out of their way to fulfill this. This is why when it says here Kol Nediv Libai, it expresses, it includes the women as well. And in this week's parsha, it talks about how the women surpassed the men in their donating and then their involvement in building the Mishkan. Let them be according to this explanation. Ba'achiluk bein anoshim v'noshim. In the difference between the men and the women, we can also explain that a zoyar that's very difficult to understand in this week's parsha. Vayakhel Moshe sagt the zoyar on the words in the beginning of the parsha. Vayakhel Moshe, the zoyar says, Rabbi Posach, Rabbi would begin and explain the parsha. Hakel esa'om ha'anoshim v'hanoshim v'hataf. In another place, the Torah says the mitzvah of Hakel. And there, the mitzvah of Hakel, to gather Yidden once in 7 years after Shemitah to the Beis HaMikdash, it says it's men, women, and children. Ma'ala halon klala de kula Yisrael. Just like there, it includes all Yidden. Of hacha klala de kula Yisrael. Here as well, it includes all Yidden. And then the Zayah concludes, Oman inon shitten ribai. Who does all of Klal Yisrael include? The 600,000. Was l'chayre is das nicht verstandig. Seemingly, this is not understood. Sagt, as the Hakel da beim Zivir of the Trumes is given bedoime, wie es is given by mitzvahs Hakel. He begins to say that the gathering of Yidden here is similar to the way it is by the mitzvah of Hakel. Hakel is ha'am, ha'anoshim, va'anoshim, va'taf, men, women, and children. As is da given klala the Kol Yisrael, punkt wie dorten. It includes all Yidden just like there. On his gleich Messiah, but then he concludes and says, "O man einen shitne ribay." This includes 600,000, but this is the mispa blois from the gvarim mi ben esrim shana v'mayla. It's only the men, and even the men from the age 20 and up. Pshita nit from the noshim v'taf. It definitely doesn't include the women and children. So the Zohar is saying one statement with a contradiction. So based on what we explained before, the explanation here is as follows. Der Mispah von Shishin Riboy steht bei Yetzias Mitzrayim. The number 600,000 is the number that it says when Yidden come out of Mitzrayim. Kishesh, Meis, Elef, Raglei, Gvarim, Levad Mitov. 600,000 men besides the children. Weil derach zeh wird untergestrochen, ot dem Mispah benegei ala matan Teire bekame Maimore Chazal. Similar, in some places in Chazal, this number is what's pointed out when it comes to the number of Yidden that were there to receive the Teire. This is Pashit. Now it's obvious. As Teire is gegeben geworden, nicht bloß zu die Shishim Ribe Gvarim Ibn Esrem. The Teire was given not only to the men, the 600,000 men from the age of 20, not euch to the alle Gvarim, including all other men, and also Noshim V'taf, women and children as well. And V'adarabe, on the contrary, if you look at the women and the children regarding Matan Teire, Bagdomel Matan Teire steht frie Kaisayim Lebeis Yaakov Elo HaNoshim. As mentioned before, when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to prepare Yidden, he says first speak to the women. Und erst danach, v'saged l'bnei Yisrael ascharem. Only afterwards to speak to the men. While derech zeh, dafka al yedei der arvos from Banenu, as the Medrash tells us, it's only by the fact that the children are the ones that are the guarantors for the continuation of Teire, hat der Rebbe gegeben die Teire zu Yidden. Hashem gives the Teire zu Yidden. So the men and women are present here as well. Und nafal pikein is memadgish the mispah from Shishim Riboy Dafke. When the Torah speaks about all of Yidden that were Matan Teire, it's the number of 600,000 that's mentioned. And Vayakhel wird nicht reingerechnet dem Noshim V'taf. This number does not include women and children. Why is this? Let's move on al pia now. But based on what we explained before here, this is understood. The Matan Teire is given the Ashras Hashchine mitzad l'mayla. At the time of Matan Teire, this is when Hashem comes down. The Shekhinah dwells into the world, and it comes down from above. Und b'shas der Gile kommt mitzad l'mayla, demot herzich nit an mayla samakabel. In this time period, the advantage of the entity of the world below elevating itself is not at all highlighted here. Nor mayla samashpia. Rather, it's the power of the unlimited power of the giver of Hashem that comes down. Der makabel is b'derech memela nimshach noch der mashpia. In this case, by Matan Teire, the Yidden, the recipient, just is overwhelmed. And it just follows the great revelation that comes down from above. Und dufa is Hazaya rausgekommen klapi anoshim, and therefore this is also expressed regarding women as a hat sich nicht angehört, zeir iloi als makabel, to identify them separately with their unique quality, which is as a recipient, that they come and give with their own feeling from below. That's not highlighted here. Und Rebbe werden sie nicht gerechnet b'fnei atzmai, and therefore they are not being mentioned here because they're not to be focused on separately. Sie werden nichlal in the mispar klali von Shishim Ribe Gvarim. They're included in the general number of 600,000 men, mishpachaisam, which refers to the men and their families, the women as well. The noshim, the taf, the women and the children, sind a prat von tofel zu dem reish habayis hamishpacha, is just secondary and included in the father, the man, which is the head of the house, of the family. It's because over here, Matan Teire, it's the mashpia, the revelation from above, which is what's taking place. And the women are just included and follow for this. The kashal is there, but now in connection to this, is the Zayah Mavaya. The Zayah comes and explains. As Vayakhel v'shteit al tzadome zu nidvas ha-mishkan. When it says Vayakhel here regarding the donating of the Mishkan in this parsha, is given klala de kula Yisrael. It includes all Yidden. Aber nicht in an Eifen wie bei Matan Teire. Not all Yidden, similar to the way it is by Matan Teire, wo die Noshim v'tav sind given nichlal in einem klal from the Anoshim, where the women and the children are present, but they join and they're together with the men. Now Noshim v'tav v'yachelek choshev b'fnei atzmai. Here the women and children stand out with their own unique quality separately. And therefore the Zohar says, Al derech vi by mitzvahs hakel. Similar to the way it is by the mitzvah of Hakel, was is nicht nur for the Anoshim, it's now only for the men. Und Noshim v'tav werden nichlal v'nigrar noch the Anoshim, and the women and the children that join are just following after the men. Now jede Sug kommt und sich mishtatif in einem Hakel als Sug b'fnei atzmai. Each one of the categories that the Torah specifies that comes by the mitzvah of Hakel comes with his own unique quality as a category for himself. U'kamudgish b'chazal, as we see this from what it says in the Gemara, that it says for each one what it is that they came for. An noshim boim lilmait, the men come to learn on their level. Noshim bois lishmaya, and the women come to listen, to hear. Taf litin schar l'meviyayin, and the women and the men, the children that is, are coming to give reward for those that are bringing them. So the Gemara is specifying that each one is coming with a unique reason according to their quality. And this is what the Zohar is saying, that it's similar here in this week's parsha when it talks about the actual nedave, the donating to the Mishkan. Since over here, what is being expressed? The Maila, the whole Aveda that comes from below, where it comes from the Makabel, the one that's giving with his feeling, with his generosity. The Rebbe, Hadan, the Noshim, so it's here that the women and even the children are also divided in a separate category, and each of their own unique quality is expressed. Although even here at this time period, the Zohar does conclude that they are part of the Shittin Riboy, the number of 600,000 of all of Klal Yisrael, and in the footnote the Rebbe explains why the Zohar highlights that point as well. That still remains true, but nevertheless, it's here that the women come with their own unique quality. And this was also expressed simply and literally as Noshim haben gegeben lenidvas hamishkan b'fnei atzmam. The women donated on their own. And even the little children haben gegeben lenidvas hamishkan, also donated from what they had for the Mishkan. Wie sagt in Oster Rabnossen, as it's related the story in Oster Rabnossen. Now, von dem Minyan Anal, from everything explained there, wie von alle Inyanim von Teire, like everything in Teire, net men areis ahirav avedas kol echad ve'echad. We take a lesson in the aveda of every individual. Jeder Yid hat der Tafkid und die Schlichus zu aufstellen am Mishkan lo yizbarach in the Sviva wo gefindt sich. Every single Yid has it in his mission, and it's his Schlichus to erect for Hashem a Mishkan, a dwelling in the surrounding, in the place where he is. Durch Mekarev sein, dorten die Yidden l'Hashem l'Avedasi Yisbarach. And how is this done? By bringing closer all those Yidden that he comes in contact with to Hashem and to serving Hashem. So it's possible that a Yid will make for himself the following calculation. Der Iker is doch zu Poil sein. The main thing to focus on is, as der man, the man, the Rosh HaMishpacha, the father, the husband, the head of the family, soll sich zuziehen und eskar werden zu Torah und Mitzvahs. He should be the one that should be drawn in and to be inspired to fulfill Torah and Mitzvahs. Also wie bei Matan Torah, like it was by Matan Torah, was the Iker hat gemusst sein, der Misbah von Shishim Ribay Gvarim. The Torah is focusing on the number of the 600,000 men. Und die Noshim v'taf, wollen mitgezogen werden, bederech memele. And the women and the children follow after the head of the family, the father. Aber, however, zu bamieren sich, als man soll reden basunde mit der Isha akeres habayis, to make an extra effort, to speak separately to the women, the ones that are the anchor of the home, as euch sie mitzat atzmo, sollen eskare werden und hitten Torah und Mitzvahs, that even she, on her own right, should be inspired and come to fulfill Torah and Mitzvahs. Wer redt noch, man soll sich herablassen und vernehmen mit Taf, and who's speaking about making time to go down and to deal with little children? Das halter is nit lefik feide. This one may think is not for my level, it's not for my honor. V'oid, additionally, says ashadit sight. It's a waste of time. The while that I can reden and learn in Torah with nachanish areish mishpacha. Instead, let him make a better investment for his time and have time to learn with a man, with an adult that's ahead of an entire family. Of them is the Hira Brura from Parshaseinu Vayakhel and Nidvas Mishkan. So here we have the clear lesson of this week's parsha regarding Vayakhel and the donating to the Mishkan. Of Yedereine Likt Achayiv, there is an obligation that lies upon everyone, and as chus and the merit, as the Ashra as Shchina soll bleiben bei von Kavua, that the dwelling of the Shchina in this world should remain permanently. as die ganze Mishpacha, the entire family, bayis and homes, sollen werden am Mishkan Lo Yisbarach, should become a dwelling for Hashem. An ort, wo der Eibishter ruht, the place where Hashem rests, and that's al yedei limud ha-Torah v'kiyum mitzvahs, by learning Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs. And here the lesson of our parsha is that this can degrecht werden dafke. This will only be accomplished specifically when wir sich nicht mistapik mit der askes mit dem ishverei shabayis. When you're not going to just be happy with just dealing with and inspiring the man, the head of the family, the head of the home. Nor es darf sein a besonderes askos. There also has to be a separate attention ba'ifan amasim umutter al pi Torah, in the appropriate manner and the way that's permitted according to Torah. Oich mit der isha akeres habayis. Also with the woman, the anchor of the home, the mainstay of the home. Und oich zu tun be'islapshus v'yigie mit dem taf, and also to come down to the level and to invest with the little children. As was mehr jüdische Kinder sollen hereingenommen werden in chinuch hakosher, that as much as possible, more children should be included in a proper education, biz and chinuch al taras hakodesh, until the ultimate level of education with absolute purity and holiness. Und durch deres askas, mit alle Yidden, and by occupying ourselves with all Yidden, was then ausgerechnet in Hakel ha'anoshim va'anoshim va'ataf, that are specified in the mitzvah of Hakel, the men, the women, and the children, is by Safet to the Pulo of Anoshim, Noshim v'taf atzmam, in addition to inspiring the men, the women, and the children as well, that jeder von sie meisav sein noch mehr in the tshuva von the andere. Each one will add and inspire the others to do tshuva as well, the Noshim of the Anoshim. The women inspire the men, and the taf of the ovis, and the children inspire their parents, as the pasuk says, v'heishiv leivavis halbanim, which means al yedei banim, that the tshuva, the connection to Torah mitzvahs of the parents, comes through the children. We bring to the time of the fulfillment of the great congregation of all the Klal Yisrael that returns to Eretz Yisrael. Bebias Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the arrival of Mashiach, was Yivne Mikdash B'mkaimai v'yikabetz Nitchei Yisrael. He will build a Beis HaMikdash and gather all Yidden scattered all over the world. B'meheira v'yameinu mamish.